I am the Empress Dowager's niece, forced by my aunt to marry the Emperor's cousin. But the outcome of a moth flying into a flame is rarely good. The first thing I did after being reborn was to find Xianxia among the beggars and marry him. Only I know that this man is the Prince of Nanhua Kingdom, who will one day become the ruthless regent. Just as my aunt had tried to force me onto my cousin, the Emperor. In my previous life, Gulingzhou calmly brushed away the tea leaves. Has the Empress decided what title to give my cousin? I knelt on the ground. My expression calm, Your Majesty. This servant has already become another man's wife. The Emperor, who rarely showed his emotions, had a storm of anger in his eyes, and the teacup in his hand was crushed. I don't believe it. Chapter 1. In Shoan Palace, my aunt ordered her attendant, Yu Hu, to bring a blue and white porcelain wine jug. Sewer. I have ordered the imperial kitchen to prepare several dishes your cousin loves. Take this sweet wine and bring it to the golden hall for your cousin. My aunt curved her eyebrows, her eyes gleaming with cunning, and looked at me with feigned kindness. The meaning couldn't be clearer. She wanted me to seduce my cousin. The wine was laced with a love potion. In my previous life, I had carried the same sweet wine to the Golden Palace Hall. Gu Lingjiu's deep, well-meaning eyes fixed on the blue and white porcelain bottle on the sandalwood tray before me. A faint smile of mockery curled the corners of his lips as he looked at me with contempt and coldness. Cousin, do you really want to marry me? I was stunned, not yet understanding what Gu Lingjiu meant, when he suddenly pulled me into his embrace. As you wish. He gripped my chin roughly and began to undo my sash. I was in love with my cousin. At that moment, I felt a mix of joy and fear, but I didn't stop him. My body trembled as I whispered, Cousin. He sneered contemptuously, picked me up, and carried me toward his bed. The first taste of lovemaking wasn't pleasant. It was painful from start to finish. I begged my cousin to be gentler, but he gripped my waist and thrust deeper. Isn't this what you begged for? What are you pretending? After the passionate encounter, I felt like a discarded puppet, casually pushed aside by him. His stunningly handsome face was as cold as ice, showing no trace of tenderness, as if the person who had just made love to me wasn't him at all. Gu Lingjiu casually threw on an outer garment and called for the head eunuch. Lin Shi-su, daughter of Lin Yian of the Ministry of Rites, born into a distinguished family, is hereby granted the title of. Gu Lingjiu paused here, glanced at me lazily, and said, Yao Fei. I was wrapped in a cloak, kneeling by the bed with my head bowed. Hearing the title he bestowed upon me, my eyelashes trembled. Demon concubine. Gu Lingjiu saw me kneeling on the ground, and the corners of his mouth curled into a playful smile. His voice was lazy yet clear. My cousin. Don't misunderstand. The title I bestowed is Yao, from the phrase Yao Guanhua Palace. Distant and unreachable, not demon. I swallowed hard, struggling to hold back the tears welling up in my eyes. He had deliberately chosen a homophone to humiliate me. Later, I found out that the wine I had given my cousin had been laced with a love potion. And my cousin knew that the wine had been laced with a love potion. So he didn't drink the wine. Instead, he took me directly. Life in his harem was no picnic either. Though I was the only woman there, he often mocked me with cold words. After being reborn, I vowed silently never to enter Gu Lingjiu's harem again. I took the sandalwood tray from Yu Hu's hands and replied, Yes, Aunt. I left Shoan Palace and went to a place where there were no palace attendants. I poured the wine into the lotus pond. I then went to the imperial kitchen and requested another jar of fine wine, which I poured into a wine flask. I stood outside the Jinshan Hall and said to Gu Jiuling's personal eunuch, Eunuch Din. My aunt knows that His Majesty is having dinner here. This is the sweet wine my aunt asked me to bring. Please deliver it to His Majesty. Eunuch Din was taken aback and looked at me in surprise. Miss Lin, aren't you going to take it in yourself? I smiled faintly and shook my head. I have other matters to attend to. Please deliver it on my behalf. I truly did have other matters to attend to. After all, there was someone at home who made me long for him day and night, waiting for me to warm his bed, my beloved husband. Din Eunuch watched my departing figure, pondering for a long time before slowly turning to deliver the sweet wine to Gujiu. As he turned, Gu Lingjiu had emerged from the Jinshan palace without a sound. He startled. Master. Gu Lingjiu said nothing. His dark eyes narrowed slightly, blending seamlessly with the night. Din reported cautiously. Master. This wine was sent by Miss Lin. She said she had other matters to attend to and did not enter the Jinshan palace, a secluded mansion on the outskirts of the city. Jiang embraced me from behind, his warm breath tickling my ear, his clear voice tinged with seduction. Sister. I curved my lips slightly, not pushing him away. He called me sister, though we were the same age. That night, exhausted, I collapsed into Jiang Sui's embrace and fell into a deep sleep. I faintly felt him holding my hand, then lowering his head to kiss various spots on my cheek. Sewer. Wait for me a little longer. 3 years ago, when I was reborn, the first thing I did was find Jiang Sui among the beggars and bring him back. No matter what, I would never let Jiang Sui relive the tragic experiences of his previous life. And I, half a year ago, had secretly pledged my life to him, marrying him in the presence of the temple abbot. On the day I returned to the Ministry of Rites to bring Jiang Sui back. It was a rainy night. As night fell, the carriage traveled southward. The sky grew dark and heavy, like ink had been poured out, with a light drizzle falling. The earthy scent of mud began to waft through the air. I entered the dilapidated temple, and several beggars eyed me with ill intent. But upon seeing me accompanied by several bodyguards wielding large knives, they quickly abandoned their plans. A putrid and foul odor assaulted my nostrils, and the air was thick with the smell of blood. I forced myself to suppress the intense nausea rising in my stomach and scanned the dilapidated temple with my eyes. Finally, in the corner behind the peeling Buddha statue, I spotted Jiang Sui. Weakened by hunger, Jiang Sui leaned feebly against the wall, his eyes filled with a cold, world-weary expression. His clothes were in tatters, and the grime on his face obscured his features, making him look like a pearl covered in dust. I walked up to him, lowered my head, and spoke softly. Will you come with me? Jiang Sui fluttered his eyelids but did not speak or look up at me. He did not recognize me, and it was only natural for him to be wary of me. I knelt down, took a piece of bread from my robe, and held it out to him. Jiang Sui did not take the bread. He raised his eyelids slightly, watching me with caution and suspicion. Behind me, several beggars saw the meat pie in my hand, their eyes gleaming with greed as they swallowed their saliva. A bold one charged forward, attempting to snatch the meat pie from my hand. He was kicked away by my servants, who drew their swords in warning. Seeing that Jiang Sui didn't reach out to take it, I took his hand and placed the pie into his palm. Don't worry. Stay by my side, and I'll protect you. Jiang Sui, who was as stingy with words as gold, finally spoke. Dirty. I paused for a moment, and he pulled his hand away from mine. Only then did I realize what he meant by dirty. I curved my lips into a smile. It's not dirty. Jiang Sui devoured the meat pie in one gulp, lowering his guard toward me. His eyes, as black as obsidian, fixed on me. Why are you being nice to me? I was momentarily lost in thought. Why was I being nice to him? Was it because he would one day become the regent of the Southern Kingdom, holding absolute power? Of course not. This ruthless and tyrannical minister, who had seized control of the government and committed heinous crimes, was willing to trade 10 cities for her. Jiang Sui was merely propping up a 5-year-old puppet emperor. He was the true ruler of Nanhua Kingdom. His nature was already brutal. And with such foolish actions, he had long lost the people's support, ultimately meeting his end as a king who lost his kingdom. In truth, even she didn't understand why Jiang Sui was willing to trade 10 cities to take her from Gulingjiu. I spoke softly, as if afraid to scare him. I need a servant. Would you like to stay by my side from now on? Jiang Sui looked at me, and under my gaze, he gradually broke down his defenses and nodded slightly, taking Jiang Sui back to the Ministry of Rites. I had someone arrange a bath for him. After washing away the grime from his body, he donned a clean white robe, radiant like the sun in the sky, dazzling and brilliant. The Jiang Sui I remembered was much more mature, dressed in a black robe embroidered with golden dragon patterns, often expressionless, with a look of cruelty and contempt in his eyes. When his coffin passed by my carriage, even though my heart ached as if it were being pierced by 1,000 needles, I forced myself to endure it, not letting a single tear fall. Thinking of this, I endured the suffocating pain and softly said to Jiang Sui, "You will stay in this side hall from now on." "Yes, I will." At that moment, Jiang Sui was as docile as a rabbit. Afterward, I gave him the status of a household servant and raised him in the Ministry of Rites. Jiang Sui lived and ate with me. His once pale and slightly waxen face, weakened by illness, grew fair and rosy, his handsome features highlighted like a poem or a painting. I would often see Jiang Sui chopping wood and drawing water. On hot days, his forehead would be covered in sweat. I felt a pang of sympathy and wiped the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. "I told you, you don't have to do these chores." Jiang Sui wiped his forehead, a smile in his eyes. "I know, but I can't just sit around doing nothing." Looking into his warm eyes, I often thought of his past life, and my heart ached. At this point, he hadn't yet developed the reckless and stubborn nature he would later exhibit. He was once a prince of the southern Wu kingdom, but if not for being betrayed by a traitor, he wouldn't have ended up begging for a living. He certainly wouldn't be doing such menial labor. During his half-year at the Ministry of Rites, he never once lamented his former status. He was living his life to the fullest. But a young man whose heart was as firm as rock, who had fallen from the stars into the mud and struggled to climb back to the peak, how could he one day become so brutal and unpredictable? During the year when I was closest to Jiang Sui, we confessed our feelings to each other. To avoid arousing suspicion from the people in the mansion, I bought a house outside the city. Every time I went out, my father and mother thought I was going to the palace. Jiang Sui held me on his lap, and I didn't push him away. Instead, I snuggled into his embrace and read a book with him, just as Jiang Sui and I were enjoying each other's company. My personal maid, Xin Cheng, came to find me. "Miss, someone from the palace has come for you. You must go to the palace immediately." Upon hearing this, Jiang Sui's eyes darkened, and he prepared to close the book. At this point, Jiang Sui had not yet become the ruthless and heartless regent he would later become. He obeyed me completely and never insisted on stopping me from leaving, as docile as a little rabbit. I knew that deep down, he always wanted me to stay. My slender, jade-like fingers rested on the book, stopping Jiang Sui from closing it. I lazily raised my eyes to look at Xinchen. "Just pretend you don't know anything." Xin Cheng was my personal maid, who had grown up with me since childhood. I trusted her implicitly, and she was the only one who knew about this courtyard. Jiang Sui's expression froze for a moment. His black eyes shimmered like spring water, and he asked joyfully, "Su Air, aren't you going back?" I kissed his lips lightly and said, "Stay with me. Will you?" Jiang Sui buried his head in my neck and gently sucked on it. "All right. However, I didn't stay the night in the end, I only stayed with Jiang Sui for 2 more hours. He was satisfied, standing at the entrance of the mansion with a lingering gaze, watching me leave. The luxurious carriage slowly came to a stop at the entrance of the minister's mansion. My mother stood anxiously beside the lion statue, her tone reproachful. "Sue, where did you go? Your aunt summoned you to the palace, do you know that?" I didn't pay much attention to my mother's scolding. "It's too late. I'll go to the palace tomorrow to pay my respects to my aunt." The next day, my aunt didn't summon me to the palace, so I didn't go. It was the 3rd year since I had been rescued from the beggars and brought back by Jiang Sui, and also the 3rd year since I had been reborn. Without telling my father and mother, I married him under the witness of the abbot. In the bedroom, red candles flickered, their light mingling with the scent of incense. Through the sheer curtains, 2 figures lay entwined, reluctant to part. I melted like spring water, softly calling his name, Jiang Sui. He was buried in his work, and upon hearing my call, he raised his eyelids slightly. Sweat droplets soaked the black hair on my forehead. I shook my head at him and breathed softly. "No more. It's too late. I'm tired." Jiang Sui holds my hand, intertwining our fingers, kisses away the tears at the corner of my eyes, and whispers to me, "Sue, can you wait a little longer?" The faint light of dawn pierces through the thick clouds. My entire body feels like it's about to fall apart. Jiang Sui sleeps beside me, seeing that I'm reluctant to get up. He pinches my cheek and smiles affectionately. "What are you thinking about?" I turned my head and hugged him, spoiling him as usual. "I was thinking, how did such a handsome man become my husband?" The regent king, who was rumored to be as cruel and violent as a murderous demon, was lying on my bed, a smile on his lips, his beautiful phoenix eyes sparkling, massaging my waist. After I finished dressing, Jiang Sui had already prepared the meal. There was a chef in the mansion, but because I had once complimented his honey-glazed shrimp soup, he often cooked it for me. As I sipped the soup, I smiled and said, "Jiang Sui, your cooking is getting better and better." Jiang Sui picked me up and sat me on his lap, his eyes sparkling with laughter. "Do you like it?" I replied, "Of course I do." Jiang Sui bit my finger, his deep voice tinged with seduction. Then, "Sister, do you like eating me?" My breath caught, and my heart raced. I couldn't eat properly anymore. The Empress Dowager summoned me to the palace. She looked at me with a suspicious expression and a serious expression. "Sue, did you not give the wine to Linger that day?" I replied calmly, "I gave it to the emperor." My aunt furrowed her brows, finding it even more strange. "Then Linger did not favor you?" I shook my head gently. "No." After I delivered the imperial wine, my cousin told Sue to leave. Suddenly, Gu Lingjiu's clear voice came from behind me. "Is that so, cousin?" My body tensed up, and I forced myself to bow to Gu Lingjiu. Gu Lingjiu raised the corner of his mouth and looked at me with a playful expression. "I did not see you in the Golden Palace that day. Could someone have impersonated me to meet with you in private?" I took a deep breath and replied calmly. "Sue thought that my cousin was busy with state affairs and didn't want to disturb you, so she asked an eunuch to send me in." Gu Lingjiu personally helped me up and sat me down on a chair. He took a sip of tea before speaking slowly. "My cousin seems to have grown up a lot compared to before." I raised my eyes to look at Gu Lingjiu. The faint smile on his lips always made me feel like there was a hint of mockery. I lowered my eyelids and spoke softly. "In the past, this servant was ignorant and often clung to the emperor. It was this servant who offended him. When I was young, my aunt had intentionally tried to match me with Gu Lingjiu, often summoning my mother to the palace. I had indeed once liked Gu Lingjiu and insisted on marrying him. But now, I am a person who has been reborn. Upon returning to the Ministry of Rights mansion, I chose an appropriate time to inform my parents of my marriage. Xianxia and I cannot act like a normal married couple, often spending time together. I can only see him for 10 days out of the month. This makes me feel like Xianxia is an unmarried mistress with no status. I have always felt guilty toward him. Xianxia has never begged me to take him to meet my parents. He only buries his head in my neck and whispers, "Sewer, please stay with me a little longer. My heart aches. And I find it even harder to leave." My father initially didn't believe me, stroking his beard leisurely, thinking I was joking with him. After all, my parents had always believed I was in love with Gulingzhou. In my previous life, that was indeed the case. But later, I fell in love with Xianxia. It wasn't until I presented the marriage certificate to his parents that the truth came to light. My father's eyes went dark, and he was so angry he nearly fainted. He locked me up in the mansion and wouldn't let me see Xianxia. On the third day of my confinement, I was pacing anxiously in my bedroom. If Xianxia couldn't see me and came to the Ministry of Rights to look for me, only to be driven away by my father, or if there was some misunderstanding that made Xianxia think I had abandoned him. I had worked so hard to soften Jiangsui's stubborn and violent temper, turning him into a graceful and elegant gentleman. I couldn't let him revert to his mad and reckless self from the previous life. As I lay in my bedroom, consumed by anxiety, the sound of a lock being opened echoed at the door. It turned out that the Empress Dowager had summoned me to the palace to attend the spring banquet. My father had no choice but to let me go, but he glared at me angrily, warning me not to say anything wrong. I curled the corners of my mouth into a faint sneer. I've just gotten married, I haven't committed any crime against the emperor. Why does it feel like I've been cheating on him? The palace had soaring eaves and interconnected halls. I arrived at my aunt's Shoan palace. Before I could enter the main hall, I was invited to a side chamber by my Aunt Yuhu. A palace attendant brought me a luxurious and extravagant gown made of flowing moon silk, with pearls embroidered on the hem like stars. I gently stroked the flowing skirt, a helpless smile spreading across my lips. My aunt has truly spared no effort to get me into the palace. But this time, I will not fulfill your wishes. I entered the main hall, where my aunt was discussing the selection of concubines with Gulingzhou. Upon seeing me, she noticed I was not wearing the dress she had given me, and a flash of displeasure crossed her eyes. However, she did not say anything accusatory, instead continuing the conversation about the selection of concubines. "Linger, Sewer is my niece, your cousin. You should have someone by your side who can serve you well. Sewer has always had feelings for you, and we've both noticed it. I intend to have Sewer enter the palace to serve you. What do you think, Your Majesty?" Gulingzhou held a blue and white porcelain cup in her hands, raised her eyelids slightly, and gave me a meaningful glance before lowering her eyes and slowly brushing away the tea leaves. "Has the Empress Dowager decided what rank to give my cousin?" Seeing that Gulingzhou had relented, the Empress Dowager smiled. "Your uncle is the Minister of the Interior. Your cousin's rank shouldn't be too low. Let's give her the rank of concubine." My face paled, and I knelt before them. "Your Majesty, Empress Dowager, this humble maiden has already married another man. I am unworthy to serve the emperor." The Empress Dowager frowned disapprovingly and said sternly, "Sewer, what are you joking about?" Gulingzhou didn't seem to mind, snorting derisively with a lazy, drawn-out tone. "Cousin, don't bother with such petty tricks. I have no time to play games with you." I bowed my head to the ground, answering humbly yet firmly, "Your Majesty, Empress Dowager, this servant dares not deceive you. I have already married another man, and my parents are well aware of this." My aunt, seeing my resolute words, immediately issued an order to summon my parents to the palace for questioning. facing the Empress Dowager's cold stare and harsh questioning. My father's forehead broke out in a cold sweat. He hesitated, then trembled as he spoke. It is true. Gu Lingzhou's eyes flashed with anger, and he crushed the teacup in his hand. Your Majesty! The palace maid beside Gu Lingzhou cried out in alarm. The shattered porcelain cut Gu Lingzhou's palm, and blood trickled down his slender fingers. A cold smile flashed across his eyes. The women in my harem must be both beautiful and intelligent, worthy of my presence. Mother, do not send just anyone to be by my side. After saying this, Gu Lingzhou stood up and left. He walked past me, paused for a moment, gave me a cold glance, and then left the Shoan Palace. The Empress Dowager glared angrily at me, who was kneeling on the ground, her face devoid of any emotion. Ji Su, how dare you arrange your own marriage? Who gave you the audacity? I spoke softly. Empress Dowager, please calm your anger. I merely wish to marry the man I love and grow old with him. My father had no concubine daughters, besides my 2 older brothers. I was his only legitimate daughter. He did not want me to be constantly scolded by the Empress Dowager. So he spoke on my behalf. Empress Dowager, this matter has already been decided. We cannot force Shou to divorce that man. Besides, I don't think the emperor likes Shou either. Why not find a woman from the Lin family's collateral branch and have her enter the palace to serve the emperor? The Empress Dowager sighed deeply, waved her hand helplessly, and dismissed me and my father. As my father and I reached the palace gates, a eunuch by Gu Lingzhou's side, holding a whisk, approached me. Miss Lin, the emperor summons you to the Golden Palace. I furrowed my brows, unsure of what Gu Lingzhou had up his sleeve. But he was, after all, the emperor, so I couldn't just leave the palace on my own. I followed the eunuch to Gu Lingzhou's Jinshan Hall. Gu Lingzhou stood with his back to me, wearing a silver-white dragon robe embroidered with gold threads. His fingers tapped lightly on the incense burner. His back was distant and cold, exuding an innate air of authority. I knelt on the smooth floor tiles and bowed to him. Gu Lingzhou slowly turned around and spoke in a cold tone, gesturing for me to rise. To whom has my cousin married? I lowered my head slightly and replied calmly. Your Majesty. To a commoner with no official position. Gu Lingzhou furrowed his brows in disbelief. You married a commoner with no official position? I replied. This servant has long been in love with him, and he feels the same for me. A flash of darkness crossed Gu Lingzhou's eyes, and his expression grew slightly fierce. Humph. What if I were to force you to become my concubine? I was startled and looked up at him. Gu Lingzhou had always looked down on me. Gu Lingzhou suddenly grabbed my arm, and the usually composed emperor's expression gradually twisted with distortion. You belong to me. You've always loved me since you were a child. Why did you change your heart and fall for someone else? My arm was being squeezed painfully. I looked up at Gu Lingzhou, seeing no warmth in his eyes. So he had always known that I once loved him. That's why he deliberately humiliated me and bestowed upon me the title of Yao Fei, which shares a homophone with disappear. But now I already have Jiang Sui. What happened between us is long gone, dark and unforgettable. There's no need to dwell on the past. Gu Lingzhou took a deep breath, suppressing the anger in his heart. He clung to a faint hope and looked at me. Sewer, are you deliberately trying to make me jealous? I don't mind if you marry someone else. After you divorce him, I will immediately grant you the title of Empress Consort. After some time, I will elevate you to Empress. I forcefully pulled away Gu Lingzhou's hand and bowed to him with a calm expression. Your Majesty, this servant's heart belongs only to Jiang Lang. I will not divorce him. If your Majesty has no further business, I would like to return. As I turned to leave, Gu Lingzhou grabbed me back with lightning speed. He held me tightly in his arms, gripping the back of my head. His warm tongue slipped into my mouth, causing my pupils to widen involuntarily. I pushed Gu Lingjiu away, but his strength was too great, and I couldn't break free. I raised my hand and slapped him across the face. I instinctively wiped my lips with my hand. Gu Lingjiu gritted his teeth, muttering my name, his eyes blazing with a dark flame that seemed ready to erupt at any moment. Lin Jisoo. After slapping Gu Lingjiu, I couldn't believe I had done it. But I didn't regret it. In my previous life, he had nothing but contempt for me. He let his concubines mock and ridicule me. I went from liking him to feeling nothing for him. My aunt urged me to compete for his favor, but I ignored her and chose to stay in my own chambers. Until that year, Jiang Sui appeared. I took a deep breath and took a step back. Your Majesty, please forgive me. You yourself said in the Empress Dowager's palace that only women of exceptional beauty and intelligence could enter your harem. This servant has already been married to another man. A low, menacing voice filled the chamber. Stop! Who gave you permission to leave? I halted my steps, turned to look at Gu Lingjiu, and said calmly, Your Majesty, you can certainly use your high position to imprison me in the Golden Palace. That is your right. However, as the ruler of the realm, a model for your subjects, and the object of their admiration, if the people were to learn that you have imprisoned a married woman in your sleeping quarters, they might inevitably draw parallels between you and the tyrannical emperors of history, which could undermine public loyalty. Gu Lingjiu's face grew tense, and he glared at me coldly. He did not speak again. I tried to leave, and he did not stop me. As I stepped out of the sleeping quarters, my legs felt weak, and a cold sweat broke out on my back. I had actually struck the current emperor. But from now on, Jiang Sui and I could be together openly. The lingering fear in my heart gradually faded away. The joy and excitement of seeing the moon after the clouds parted surged in my heart. I left the palace and went to the house Jiang Sui and I had arranged outside the city. I pushed open the gate of the mansion and called out joyfully, Jiang Sui, I'm back. From now on, he wouldn't have to live here like a concubine anymore. I would make him appear before my parents with pride. Every time I returned and called out Jiang Sui's name, he would appear immediately. Then he would rush over and hold me tightly in his arms, unable to contain his longing, and say, Sewer, you're finally back. I've been waiting for you for so long. Strangely, I didn't hear his voice this time. I called out softly again, Jiang Sui? The setting sun was swallowed by the night, and I sat at the stone table in the courtyard for a while before walking into the hall. Still, Jiang Sui hadn't come. I had never stayed alone in this mansion before. Every time I stayed, Jiang Sui was always with me, without any maidservants by my side. I felt a bit afraid living alone in this vast mansion. But the thought of Jiang Sui returning and seeing me first made me suppress the fear in my heart and choose to stay here. 3 days later, I didn't wait for Jiang Sui, but instead waited for Gu Lingjiu. He was dressed casually, wearing a black robe, with only one attendant by his side, the commander of the imperial guards. A shadow of grayish-blue lingered under Gu Lingjiu's eyelids, and his deep eyes suddenly turned red. He cleared his throat, his voice hoarse, Sewer, I know everything. I was startled and asked him, What does your Majesty know? Gu Lingjiu was deep thinking, cold-hearted, arrogant, and proud, viewing all under heaven as ants. This was the first time I had seen Gu Lingjiu like this. The corners of his eyes turned red again. It was my fault. I shouldn't have treated you that way. I suddenly understood. He had also returned. As I was lost in thought, he pleaded again. Sewer, come back. I was wrong. I shook my head, my tone neither cold nor warm. Your Majesty is not at fault. It is my mistake. In my previous life, I insisted on entering the palace. And the outcome of loving someone I couldn't have was karma. Looking deep into my heart, did I hate Gu Lingzhou for treating me that way? I did. But in the previous life, I wasn't completely without choice when I entered the palace. Knowing he didn't like me, I still clung to false hopes, ending up like a moth drawn to a flame. The one I should truly hate is myself. Gu Lingzhou stepped forward, losing his usual composure, and explained to me with a hint of urgency. No. Sooner. I love you. I stared at Gu Lingzhou for a moment, trying to find any trace of a lie on his face. Your Majesty, I can endure the fact that you've never loved me. But you dare to say that you love me? I curled my lips in contempt. You made me the Empress consort, turning me into a laughingstock in the harem. Every time you summoned me to your bedchamber, you mocked me with your words. When your Empress consort accused me of poisoning her, you didn't even bother to investigate and imprison me in the Phoenix Palace for an entire year. And now you say you love me? A look of pain and regret flashed across Gu Lingzhou's brow. The Empress Dowager is not my biological mother. When she intended to bestow you upon me, I did indeed feel annoyed by the sense of being controlled. Later, I came to love you without realizing it. One mistake led to another. I knew you did not poison the Empress consort. But by then I had already sensed your heart was no longer with me. I wanted to hear you beg for mercy. So I smiled at Gu Lingzhou, but there was no trace of humor in my eyes. So you imprisoned me in the Chiefeng Palace for an entire year. That year, on Lady Li's birthday, I selected the finest fabrics and sent them to the Luoxia Palace. Within 3 days, palace attendants reported that Lady Li had worn a garment made from the fabrics I had sent and had been poisoned. I found it utterly absurd. Gu Lingzhou didn't investigate further, he simply ordered me to be imprisoned in the Chiefeng Palace for a year. What he did to me, was there even a single thing that made me feel he had ever liked me? By that point, I had already grown tired of life in the palace. So the punishment of being locked away felt like a relief. I didn't have to pretend to be someone I wasn't around anyone else. I was simply disappointed in his actions. While I was confined in the Chiefeng Palace, he did not allow others to enter. Yet he often came himself. Gu Lingzhou sat on the soft couch, lowering his eyelids, gazing at me with a complex expression. Is there nothing you wish to say to me? I knelt on the ground and replied indifferently, this servant has nothing to say. He clenched the jade bead symbolizing imperial authority in his hand, tightening his grip little by little, his cold eyes flashing with anger. After a long pause, he spoke in a gloomy tone. Come here and undress me. That night, palace attendants brought hot water time and time again. As soon as Gu Lingzhou left, the eunuch in charge of the emperor approached me. Your Majesty, the emperor came to see you. He must care about you. If you act a little more affectionate and submissive toward him, he will release you. The eunuch's face was slightly anxious, with dark circles under his eyes. I smiled and said, Din eunuch, did you not sleep well? Din eunuch was taken aback and muttered, this servant takes his leave, before hurrying away. Gu Lingzhou stepped forward, embraced me, and his eyes, as deep as ink, glistened with tears. Sewer. As an emperor, there are many unavoidable hardships I cannot speak of or explain. I can only keep them buried in my heart. I know I have wronged you. I will never do so again. Will you marry me? I will treat you better than anyone else, as long as you give me another chance. I pushed Gu Lingzhou away and spoke calmly. Your Majesty, since heaven has given me another chance to choose, I cannot return to the palace. Besides, I am already married. A bucket of cold water seemed to be poured over Gu Lingzhou. He let go of me slowly, his expression filled with disappointment, and gave a self-deprecating smile. He had forgotten that I had already married in this lifetime. Gu Lingzhou closed his eyes, suppressing the pain in his heart. When he opened them again, he had returned to his usual cold and dignified demeanor. Where is he? I want to see him. Jiang Sui had not returned for 3 days. So I had no choice but to tell a lie. He went out on an errand and hasn't returned yet. Gu Lingzhou studied me closely, a flash of surprise in his eyes. Sewer, is it because you don't want to go back to the palace with me that you made up an excuse about getting married? I smiled lightly and shook my head, Your Majesty. On the day of my wedding with Jiang Sui, though there were no parents present, the neighbors and the abbot of Han Shui Temple were all witnesses. The smile in Gu Lingzhou's eyes vanished instantly. Jiang Sui had been gone for a month. So I returned to the Ministry of Rites mansion. I even sent someone to look for Jiang Sui. But those who returned had no clues. I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling physically and mentally exhausted. He hadn't said a word. Where had he gone? Gu Lingzhou came to the Ministry of Rites mansion. His eyes were red, and he knelt before me, begging humbly, Sewer, I don't mind that you've been married before. Please come back with me. For the past month, he had dreamed of Sewer every night. He finally realized how terribly he had been wrong. He disliked the Empress Dowager, so he naturally despised her niece as well. But that little girl who had grown up so sweet and innocent, who had always called him cousin in a soft voice, did he truly despise her? What he despised was the life he had been forced to live. He had loved her from the very beginning, but at some point, he had been blinded by his desire for revenge. When he found out that his cousin was serving him wine laced with a love potion, he knew it was the Empress Dowager's doing. But he still took his anger out on his cousin. He married Lady Li because her family was at odds with the Ministry of Rites and even more so with the Empress Dowager. He never touched her. Later, his cousin's eyes no longer held the love of the past. She began to treat him with indifference and coldness. He felt fear for the first time. As his cousin's love slipped away like sand through his fingers, he desperately tried to hold on, but it only made the sand slip away faster. The regent of Nanwu Kingdom, for the sake of Suner, had become so debauched that he traded 10 cities for her. Ending up as a king who lost his country was his just punishment. But his cousin had actually fallen in love with him. When he woke up, his chest felt like it was being torn apart. The pain so intense he couldn't breathe. I looked at Gu Lingzhou, who was kneeling before me, looking somewhat humble, and just as I was about to speak, my stomach churned. Gu Lingzhou's face turned pale, and he panicked, supporting me and calling for the imperial physician. The imperial physician took my pulse. Miss Lin, this is a pulse of pregnancy. You are already 1.5 months pregnant. I curved my lips and had someone reward the imperial physician. Gu Lingzhou's face alternated between pale and ashen, filled with regret that felt like vines tightening around his chest. If he hadn't made his cousin drink the abortion potion, they might have had several children. A tear slipped from the corner of his eye as he left the Ministry of Rites in a daze. I wasn't much better off. I had been pregnant for half a year and hadn't seen Jiang Sui return. I even sent people to Nanwu Kingdom to search for him. But there was no news at all. Over time, I gave up searching for Jiang Sui's whereabouts. Instead, I focused on the cosmetics shop and gold hairpin and fabric shop I had opened in the capital. I had Gu Lingzhou personally named the shops. He knew he had wronged me, so I let him do something for me. And he did it willingly. I also used him when I needed to. After all, the current emperor had named my shops, which would bring me great wealth. Gu Lingzhou often disguised himself as a commoner and came to my cosmetics shop. Is there anything else I can help you with? I smiled and said, there's nothing for the emperor to help with at the moment. If there is, I'll definitely let you know. Gu Lingzhou nodded slightly, then had someone bring out a box of pastries, his eyes sparkling with a smile. Sewer, this is your favorite taro pastry. Try some. I picked up a piece of taro pastry and took a bite. Slightly surprised. This isn't made in the palace? Gu Lingzhou replied. I bought it myself. The people in the palace can't replicate the flavor of the pastries from the West City's Old Fortune and Blessing shop. I gently placed the pastry back and said softly, Your Majesty need not go to such lengths. My feelings toward you will not change. Gu Lingzhou lowered his eyes in sadness. I know. Over the past half year, even though I was pregnant, he had occasionally mentioned how much he wanted to be a father and wanted me to enter the palace as his empress. But he was afraid I would get angry and never see him again, so he dared not speak openly about it. 3 months later, I gave birth to a daughter and named her Lin Sui. I often called her Yi. Half a year after giving birth, people began coming to propose marriage. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the doorframe of the Ministry of Rites was nearly worn out from all the visitors. Later, fewer and fewer people came to propose. I knew this was Gu Lingzhou's doing, but I didn't blame him. After all, I didn't want to marry again either. Having lived 2 lifetimes and married 2 men, both ended the same way. Meanwhile, the 4 shops I opened in the capital had brought me a fortune over the past year. I had the ledgers of the 4 shops brought to me. My fingers danced across the smooth, warm jade abacus, calculating this month's profits. My mother, holding my 1-year-old son Yi, mentioned to me, Su heir. The eldest son of the Qinguogong family has been talented since childhood and is also very handsome. This morning, the Qinguogong secretly mentioned to your father that his eldest son is willing to marry you. And he even wants to treat Yi as his own daughter. Over the past 6 months, due to Gu Lingzhou's influence, the prominent young men of the capital's aristocratic families dared not come to the Ministry of Rites to propose marriage. I never expected that the Qinguogong would dare to defy Gu Lingzhou and agree to arrange a marriage for his son. My fingers paused on the abacus, and I curved my lips into a smile, but it was forced. Mother, the emperor thinks the same way. My mother didn't understand my meaning, but you don't want to enter the palace. Do you? I continued calculating the accounts and said, That's right. I don't even want to be the empress, let alone the wife of the Qinguogong son. My mother said again, Are you still waiting for that faithless man? I closed the ledger, hugged Yi in my arms, and lifted my eyelids. Mother, Yi takes my surname. She is a Lin. Though I may be exaggerating when I say I'm wealthy enough to rival a kingdom, I am still on the wealth list of the capital city. If you believe a woman must marry in this life, then you and father can consider me no longer your daughter. Jiang Sui. Ever since I gave birth to Yi, I had no illusions about him. Those 3 years were wasted. Holding Yi in my arms, I began teaching her to speak. Yi, call me mother. The little one called out in a soft, babyish voice, Ainong. That single word, Ainong, melted my heart, and the sweetness of it left me intoxicated. The manager of the cosmetics shop came to the inner chambers to find me. Madam, there are guests. I raised my eyes. You may attend to them. Zhang San brought out a gold ingot and handed it to me with both hands. This distinguished guest has given you a gold ingot. I handed Yi to my mother and went to the front hall. The man wore a snow-blue silk robe embroidered with silver threads forming swirling clouds. He sipped the tea offered to him, his every movement exuding a cold, noble aura. I looked at his profile, suppressing the ripples in my heart. It was him. He raised his eyes and saw me, standing up excitedly and calling out to me. Sewer. I curved my lips, treating him no differently from ordinary guests. What kind of rouge would the gentleman like to choose? Jiang Sui's tender gaze remained fixed on me. I'm not buying rouge. I'm here for you. I spoke coldly and distantly, since you're not buying rouge. Please leave. Zhang San. Return the gold ingot to him. Zhang San returned the gold ingot to Jiang Sui. Here you go. Sir. Jiang Sui did not take the gold ingot but chased after me, embracing me from behind. Sir. It's Jiang Sui. I turned around and pushed him away, raising my hand to slap him across the face. I don't care if you're Jiang Sui or Hai Sui. If you keep bothering me, I'll report you to the authorities. Jiang Sui's attendants gasped in shock. Your Highness. I heard the attendants address him and froze. Your Highness. So he had gone to Nanwu Kingdom these past 2 years and become the regent prince above all others. Jiang Sui's eyes turned red with tears. And he said pitifully, Sir, are you abandoning me? I curled the corners of my mouth into a mocking smile. You're just a beggar I took in from the streets. What right do you have to talk about wanting or not wanting me? It was he who left without a word, abandoning me. Yet now he dared to turn the tables on me. His attendants, enraged, drew their swords and pointed them at me. How dare you, you woman, speak to our prince in such a manner? Jiang Sui pinched the sword between his fingers and snapped the cold blade in half. Get out! He glanced back at his attendant with a cold stare, a flash of cruelty in his eyes. Jiang Sui looked at me, his eyes reddening. Sir, 2 years ago, I didn't mean to leave without telling you. I had to return to Nanwu Kingdom, where danger lurked at every turn. I couldn't bring you along to risk your life with me. After the power struggle, I came straight here to bring you back. He opened his arms to embrace me, but saw only coldness in my eyes. He sheepishly withdrew his hands and tried to take mine. Sir, I thought of you every moment I was in Nanwu Kingdom. I scoffed, pulled my hand away from his, and spoke slowly. Jiang Sui, we've only been married for 2 months. I don't have that much feeling for you. Jiang Sui's breathing halted. I don't believe you. You even gave birth to our daughter. My pupils dilated, and I glared angrily at Jiang Sui. Did you send people to spy on me? Jiang Sui said tenderly. Sir, you are the apple of my eye. How could I bear 2 years without any news from you? Jiang Sui's words were not enough to move me. He moved to the mansion outside the city where he had lived before and stayed there for a month, coming to see me every day. Gu Lingzhou heard that I was being harassed by a man and came to the shop to see me. The moment he saw Jiang Sui, he understood everything. He had seen Jiang Sui in his previous life. Gu Lingzhou withdrew his gaze and asked me, Sir, is he your father? I nodded slightly. Yes. Gu Lingzhou gave me a bitter smile. The rusty emotions between us happened to meet a rainy day. I foolishly thought I could wash away the rust. But the rust was actually left by me. Sir, I hope you live better than anyone else in this life. If he were just an ordinary nobleman's son, it wouldn't matter. None of them are worthy of Sir. But it just so happens that Jiang Sui is this love-struck fool. He's also the son of the former empress of Nanwu Kingdom, a legitimate heir. I furrowed my brows, not understanding his meaning. I looked at Gu Lingzhou's figure, lonely and desolate. The moonlight shone brightly on the world, and stars filled the sky. Inside the palace, the fire was burning brightly. I sat by the cradle, rocking Yi to sleep. Just as I stood up, yawning from fatigue, the window of my room was pushed open. Jiang Sui, wearing a moon-white fox fur robe, jumped through the window. I stared at him in shock. Jiang Sui apologized to me with a guilty and wronged expression. Sister, I was wrong. I was so angry that my chest rose and fell unsteadily. He dared to break into the minister's mansion. Jiang Sui, this is the minister's mansion. Jiang Sui's eyes were red, and he spoke softly. Sister, do you not want to go to Nanwu Kingdom with me? It's okay. I'll stay here as long as you don't abandon me. I snapped angrily. Do not call me sister. Jiang Sui's eyes reddened further. But you used to love hearing it. I said. I no longer love you. so I no longer want to hear it. Jiang Sui glanced at Yi sleeping in the cradle. But we have a child now. I raised my eyelids slightly and corrected him. That's my child alone. Jiang Sui hung his head dejectedly. But without me, you can't have a child on your own. I said. It's just a seed. You don't need that one seed either. Jiang Sui, but. I was extremely annoyed. Stop with the buts. Get out. Don't mention his past life, where he was wild and violent. Even in this life, though he was as gentle as jade, he had never been this clingy before. Jiang Sui, but that's what I worked so hard for day and night. I glared at him. Are you leaving or not? Jiang Sui looked at me pitifully. Sister. It's snowing outside. It's so cold. I snapped. Stop wasting my time. It was just as cold when you came in. Jiang Sui stood at the door, hesitating to leave, as if silently challenging me to show mercy. Lin Sui, who had just fallen asleep, suddenly started crying. Jiang Sui was faster than me, stepping forward to hug the child and gently soothing Lin Sui. Daddy will hold you. Daddy will hold you. The little one doesn't want Daddy to leave. Does he? Daddy won't leave. So stop crying. Okay? Seeing Jiang Sui's shameless expression, I nearly fainted from anger. Lin Sui cried. But he was actually quite a handful. If he wanted to be soothed, let him be soothed. I had been busy all day at the shop and was exhausted. I lay on the bed, covered myself with the blanket, and felt sleepy. To my surprise, Jiang Sui had actually managed to calm the child and put him to sleep. He quietly climbed onto my bed and hugged me from behind. I asked him calmly, "Are you now the regent of Nanhua Kingdom?" Jiang Sui nodded. Yes. I didn't know what emotions were swirling inside me. I had thought that since I had saved him from the beggars, he wouldn't walk down the same path as in his previous life. After a moment, he spoke in a low voice. Sewer. Actually, I've been back for a long time. I was stunned. What? Jiang Sui wrapped his arms around me from behind, his burning hands gripping mine. When you took me away from the beggars in this life, I knew that you had been reborn just like me. But with you by my side, I would never resort to killing again. Jiang Sui must have used some means to win over my parents and my older brother and sister-in-law, as they actually allowed him to stay at the Ministry of Rights mansion. During the day, I went to the shop, and he would take the children with me. At night, we would return home together in the carriage. This routine continued for over a month. After Jiang Sui had put Yi to sleep, he sighed contentedly. Su Air, Yi really looks just like you when you were little. I looked at him suspiciously. Have you seen what I looked like when I was little? Jiang Sui raised his eyebrows. Of course I have. I glanced at him disdainfully. You're lying. Jiang Sui, then let me ask you. Did you ever go to Nanhua Kingdom when you were a child? I thought for a moment and shook my head. I don't remember. It seemed like my parents had taken me to a very distant place. He climbed onto the bed, his hot breath brushing against my ear. Sewer. I want you. His eyes, as dark as the night, were tinged with desire, his voice low and hoarse. I pushed him away. Go back to your own room and sleep. Jiang Sui swallowed hard, his feather-like eyelashes trembling slightly from suppressed desire. Will you come with me? I glared at him. Forget it. Jiang Sui took a deep breath, unable to bear it any longer. Sewer. It's been over 2 years. I snorted coldly. I don't believe you didn't have a woman in Nanhua Kingdom. You might even have concubines there. Jiang Sui looked at me with a hurt expression, his deep eyes burning with desire. Sewer. How can you accuse me like that? I've always kept myself pure there. If there was any other woman besides you, I'd rather never touch a woman again and never be forgiven by you. Sewer. Give it to me. Sister. His burning body enveloped me, making me feel hot all over. I instinctively stepped back, but he grabbed my waist and pulled me back. I trembled all over. Take me to your room. Jiang Sui found a robe for me to wear, his eyes unable to contain the raging desire within him. He held me tightly and took me to the side hall. At the age of 1 or 2, he spoke clearly and began calling Jiang Sui father. Jiang Sui stayed in the northern Ming kingdom for a year and returned to the southern Wu kingdom once. But he hurried back. He had purchased a mansion in the city and wanted me to move there with him. I asked him, "Aren't you going back to Nanwu Kingdom?" Jiang Sui replied, "At first, I wanted to take you back with me, but your home is here in Baiming. Asking you and Yi to go to Nanwu with me would break my heart. You don't want to leave this place, and I can't bear to see you sad. In truth, I also didn't want to leave the capital city and go to Nanwu with him. The silver I've earned here in the capital, who wouldn't envy that? Many wives of prominent families have begun to learn from me. Rather than being confined to the inner quarters, competing with concubines for favor, or spending their lives raising children and tending to their husbands. So I've been torn lately, unsure whether to go with Jiang Sui to Nanwu. But since he's willing to stay, I'm still thrilled, and it resolves the conflict in my heart." Jiang Sui, with his usual lack of decorum, hugged me and spoke lightly. "Besides, my wife is the richest woman in the capital. I want to live off her and let her support me." I shot Jiang Sui a disdainful glance. "Who wants to support you?" Jiang Sui, shameless as ever, replied, "That's not fair. From the moment you gave me a meat pie and decided to support me, you're obligated to support me for life. I'm not letting go of this soft meal." He's eating this soft meal so brazenly.